You've heard the expression, keep it real? Keep it real? I hear it a lot. Now, it's about not being phony, right? It's about not pretending that you are something that you're not. But keeping it real is easier to talk than to walk. It's hard enough these days where if you admit that you made a mistake, you might get sued for everything you have. If you admit that you're an atheist, you could get fired. If you admit that you're gay, you might not get hired. If you admit that you don't agree with your boss, you might be asked to retire. In other words, you could not get hired, get fired, or retired if you keep it real. So in this don't ask, don't tell kind of culture of ours, how does anyone keep it real? Today I want to talk about how we can keep it real in our religious life. That means not hiding our doubts, not hiding our questions, or who we love. But churches can often be the hardest places to keep it real. Right? Have you ever been around certain church folks who, when you ask them how they're doing, they always say things like, oh, everything is glorious. I am so blessed. God is good. You know what I'm talking about? God is good all the time. Right now, I'm feeling God's goodness. And then, meanwhile, they were arguing with their husband the whole way to church in the car. When they got out in the parking lot, he called her a word that rhymes with witch. Their credit cards are maxed out. The kids are on drugs. But God is great, and we are blessed. At least until they get back in the car and start arguing again. In many ways, this church is, or it ought to be, a place where we can keep it real. In many ways, we are a religion that prides itself on keeping things real. Here you can be who you are, you can believe what you believe, and you can even not believe what you don't believe. The true test of membership here is, do you live a life, are you striving to live a life that is infused with love and with service? And do you have the courage to keep it real when it comes to life and God? And part of keeping it real is being able to admit that life is sometimes hard. Sometimes we don't feel blessed. And life doesn't feel like a blessing. That's real. And that's okay. But we live in a culture where it seems that everyone is supposed to be happy, or else something's wrong. You may recall that a few weeks ago I was passionate about explaining how love is the essence of life and how Jesus, more than anyone else, has taught me and encouraged me to love my neighbor, to love God, even to try to love my enemies. But when it comes to keeping it real, there is no better teacher than the Buddha. Buddha is all about keeping it real. American Buddhist Sharon Salzberg tells a story about a mother who has to explain to her 4-year-old child that the woman who has cared for him since he was born is going to have to move away. The mother takes great efforts to be thoughtful in explaining what's happening. She tells her son that his nanny really loves him and that he can call and write her whenever he wants, but that she will be moving away to be with her sister. And when the mother finishes, the boy, who's been listening very carefully, says, "Mommy, tell me the story again, but with a different ending." There are times when all of us wish that we could change the ending of a story. Years ago, I came across a story in an advice column in the newspaper, I think it was Ann Landers, about a couple who had a baby with Down syndrome. They talked about their initial feelings of shock and disappointment. They had so many hopes and expectations and plans and dreams leading up to the baby's birth. And then in the article, they described their experience of having a Down's child using a travel metaphor. They said that it was as if they had been planning a trip to Italy for 9 months. And they had bought travel guides and they'd read up on all the best places to go and things to do. They had purchased and charted maps and routes that they had planned to travel. Over 9 months, they could practically taste the experience and visualize being there. And then there was the plane ride. It was long and bumpy and at times uncomfortable. But they were comforted by knowing that Italy was waiting on the other end of the ride. But when the plane landed and they got off, they found that they were in Holland. At first they were shocked and confused. Then they were angry and very disappointed. They realized that all the books and all the preparation that they'd done was useless. They were going to have to buy all new books and maps and learn about a whole new country and culture. But once the couple came to accept the fact that they were not in Italy, they realized, well, it might not be Italy, but it is Holland. And it has windmills and tulips and indeed is a beautiful and an interesting place. They explained that once they accepted what was real, they found that their new child brought incredible love and blessings into their lives. They learned that one of the greatest lessons that all of us have to learn, and that is that we should try not to judge our situation against some fantasy that we have of a perfect life. But rather, when we can accept what is, then we find our blessings. When we can accept what is, then we find our blessings. Do you know the phrase, and the truth shall make you what? Free, right? And the truth shall make you free, which is how in biblical times they said keeping it real is liberating. I have a story about this that I learned from my father, who some of you know has been a hospice volunteer for 18 years. Some years ago, he was asked to participate in a program called the Butterfly Program. The Butterfly Program is a palliative care program for terminally ill children. Now, it's different from hospice, in which usually the person who enters hospice, they know is going to die in a relatively short period of time, like 6 months or so. But in the Butterfly Program, these children are expected to live for years, and some of them even live into their teens. They took the name because butterflies live only a short time, but in that time they bring much beauty and grace to the world. My father's young friend's name is Anthony, and he was 4.5 years old when my dad met him. Anthony has retinoblastoma, which is cancer of the retina. At one point early in Anthony's life and his diagnosis, his parents took him to Venezuela to a well-known Catholic faith healer named Maria Esperanza. And they, of course, were hoping for a cure, hoping for a miracle. What they got instead was a healing, not of the eyes or of the cancer, but a healing for their family, which allowed them to discover a deeper love and acceptance and to deal with what happened next. Within months of returning, Anthony lost sight in his second eye. The family showed my father a video of the session that they had with Maria Esperanza, and at one point, Maria said to the family that this is a crossroads in your lives. And my dad could see in the video the tears welling up in the parents' eyes. They realized that their time with Anthony on earth would be short. The message he heard was, take your son home and be kind to him. He will not be cured. Protect your baby, and when the judgment comes, you will be judged by your kindness and the care and the love that you give to him. And with that crossroads, the parents came to accept what was real. And when they did, their love grew even deeper, knowing that each day together was a blessing. There can be healing even when there is no cure, because cure is of the body, but healing is of the heart. And it reminds us that we can change a story even and especially when we stop pretending about the ending. That's called keeping it real. The Buddhists have a lot to teach us in this regard.